Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. Monday morning migraine quarterback? Yeah, I got one of those going on. It's one of those days. So, Monday morning hotness quarterback, though, is still going on no matter what. So let's talk about it. Let's do it. As I mentioned over the weekend, thank you for helping me officially hit the 2K mark. Amazing. We only need 8K more to hit my goal of 10K by the end of 2021. 10K 2021! Not quite the same ring, but I like the sound of it a lot better at the same time. So, anyway, longest run of videos consecutively I'll probably ever do. And so there will be a couple days. I might even just not even put out anything between now and the end of the week when the Kickstarter roundups. I don't know. Maybe a Marvel United, should you back? That's really maybe the only thing I feel really strongly passionate about in the next couple days. But there's always something that surprises me, and there's always something, interesting to talk about. So who knows? Whatever. Something will come out. Okay. Enough blabbing. Thank you again for watching. Thanks for putting up with me. Let's do this. So first up in the hotness is the Siege of Runedar. Why is this at the top of the list? It's the latest Nizia, and no one really knows anything about it, right? It's being put out by Ludonova. The concept of this game, you are guarding as dwarves this old, what you thought was an abandoned mine of Runedar, and then all of a sudden, boom, you struck it rich. And as you're getting ready to sort of take your riches back to the nearest citadel, you find out that these orcs are besieging you because, rumor slipped out that you got a bunch of gold. So not only now do you have to defend the ruins of this old fortress against the orcs trying to overwhelm it, you then also have to dig a tunnel in order to escape because there is no way you're going over it or through it, so you gotta go under it. 1 to 4 player, solo, cooperative game. This is on my wish list already. I don't know anything else about it, but it screams, I'm interested. You're fighting against orcs, goblins, trolls, doing close range combat, doing distance combat, whatever you need to do to keep them from getting too far in. And then, on top of being a cooperative game, they throw in the deck building aspect, allowing you to upgrade. Now, they talk about just your weapons. I'm guessing there's going to be a few other things that get upgraded, though, as well, in order to be able to fend them off better. You interested yet? You want to hear more? Too bad. You can't. There's not really any other information out there. But, if you want it, go subscribe to the Board Game Geek page like I am, so that when more stuff comes out, you'll know about it as soon as I do. I'm super interested. Like I said, deck building, cooperative, you've got me with the hook before you even go in with the fantasy theme. It's just overkill then at that point for me. So I'm going to be following this one very closely. Next up, obviously, Lost Ruins of Arnak. Still sitting towards the top of the hotness each week. It's becoming more available and more people are picking it up. More people are selling it. More people are, buying it and getting rid of it. So it's just seeing a lot of clicks. Oath is next up. Chronicles of Empire and Exile. Super high on the top of my wish list. And it is delivering to backers. And it has been. But now people around myself in the US are also getting their copies. So you're going to see it probably stay towards the top of the hotness. It's a 1 to 6 player competitive game where you're trying to guide the history of the land as either agents trying to change the kingdom or as a warlord trying to rule it with an iron fist. And the effects of one game ripple through into future games. So this is not a legacy game, but it's in more of an aftershock game in the sense that there are going to be ripples and aftershocks throughout the gameplay. And so this is much more of a potentially group meta style game. It'll be interesting to see how many of these end up on the secondary market because it had, I think, over 10,000 backers on Kickstarter. And invariably, like the first printing of Root, a lot of those ended up on the secondary market, or a high percentage of them, more than you would expect, just by the nature of what people thought Root was and what it actually was. And I'm guessing the same sort of thing is going to happen here. It's just to what degree. Because nowadays, with all of the Kickstarter information, previews, videos, gameplays, thoughts, even prior to the campaign, let alone during the campaign and in the late pledge stages of things, people are more informed than ever. So, will this game from Cole Worley see some of that as well? Now, the other interesting thing is, after I put out the video 2 weeks ago saying Miniature Market had it for $80, they jacked their price up to $96. And I questioned it on Twitter, and they responded to me and they said, well, it's just the market supply and demand. Like, come on, man. Really? Okay, sure. I understand it's a business. So, you know, you do what you got to do, but still, it's kind of, that's a 20% increase. So, anyway, expect to see more of it. Expect to see a lot of it on the Hotness in the near future still for the next couple weeks as it's, you know, sort of getting the hype and the reviews are going to be coming out there. You can see already, it's already got an 8.2, but it only has 350 ratings, and you're going to see it climb up the rankings. It's under, just under 3,000 right now, and the thematic and the strategy, it's just going to shoot up. So what's the ceiling going to be for this game? Is it going to be like Root? Is it going to be a little more divisive? Is it going to be less divisive? I don't know. Now, I mentioned that this is an Aftershock game, but there's also the non-Aftershock side of things. I don't want to leave a bad taste in anyone's mouth saying that that's the only way you can play it, because you can play it with a completely different group. The effects may carry over to the game, but you don't need to be having the same people play in each game. It is a card drafting, hand management, area majority style game. It is also potentially very swingy. And I think that was the other reason people were not as enthralled by it initially. But I will say, I expect this game to be very highly thought of, regardless of whether or not it's for you or for me or for anybody, because of the iterations of testing. And not just testing, because we talk about testing and gameplay. I mean, thousands of hours for each game for some of these situations. But this is public testing that went into it from that side of things. So outside of this circle, outside of the house that built it in the first place. And when you open it up to that, I would think that if the constructive criticism is there and taken into account, that is just going to make it better. Within reason, obviously. We see the opposite sometimes happen with Kickstarter, where the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and sometimes that's not such a good thing. But I hopefully do not think that that's going to happen in this case. But we'll see. So, like I said, it'll be interesting to follow. Next up is Hippocrates. Now, you may have seen that on my video roundup from this past week, but it is a just launched Kickstarter from the Game Brewer. It is a more of a worker placement style tile placement game where you are disciples of Hippocrates and you are managing the first hospital essentially in history and trying to be the most successful, earning the most money, hiring doctors, matching doctors up with patients, having the right resources to be able to cure the right diseases, but also enough to pay your workers in the first place. It's an interesting twist and take on things. I really like the theme. We do not see enough of the theme, and I don't mean ancient Greece and that side of things. I mean just from the medical side of things. And if you jump over to the Kickstarter page now, you can see that they're already almost 4 times their funding goal with a very, very respectable almost $140,000, less than a week into it. So again, it's not going to blow your socks off Euro style, 7 digits, but that's really good for a Euro. And as with all good Euros, you can get your deluxe coins, and they're offering the deluxe pledge level. So if you're interested in it, you should probably be getting it on Kickstarter. You can take a look more at the mechanics on the page itself from my video this past week, or I think there's a rule book even up. So go ahead and take a look if it interests you. Next up is Robinson Crusoe. Again, another rehash, but just because the campaign is winding down and getting towards the end on GameFound, you can see that they are almost at 1.75 million euros, which again is very impressive. By the time this video airs, just over a day left in the campaign. So if you're interested, you need to go check it out, as this collector's edition from Portal Games with miniatures, with a big book of adventures, but also a somewhat bigger price point. So there you go. Again, Marvel Champions hitting hard this week, and that's because this past week, the most wanted big box expansion was released on April 2, and so buyers from the retail side of things now got their copies and have started playing it, started rating it, started clicking on it. They've also recently announced, obviously, with Most Wanted being out now, with Rocket and Groot and Nebula, they have announced Drax, Star-Lord, and Gamora as separate expansions as well, which is probably helping the clicks over to the page. If you're not familiar with Marvel Champions, it is one of the latest LCGs from Fantasy Flight Games, where you're taking your favorite Marvel heroes and you're battling against villains LCG style, having a deck that can either be pre-constructed or you can participate in the deck construction, which is again part of the appeal of these games in the first place. And you have plenty of heroes now, and with this second big box expansion, we're starting to see some of the depth that this game will hopefully be able to provide, because that was the big critique when it came out, comparing the base game of this to Arkham Horror and Lord of the Rings, with the, years or even almost decade of material versus the base game of this. And so hopefully we're going to see a little bit more nuance, a little bit more variability, and a little bit more depth to really keep this one around for many years to come. It's my own personal opinion. I will eventually pick this up once I be able to play a deck constructor, and I'm probably a little bit off from that in terms of the kids' complexity. Anyway, but I really enjoy it, and it's going to stay in my collection. So anyway, that's why it is on the Hotness list this week. Following right up with the same theme and the same IP, Marvel United, but this time from CMON. So April 14, this week, launching Marvel United X-Men. You already know where my position is on that. I'm going to put out a video on it. I'm all in. I love the game. You can see it in the background here. The expansion's sitting there. Have really only even delved a little bit into part of the Kickstarter exclusives, but there's a lot of content. Do I need more? No, absolutely not. Do I want the X-Men? Absolutely. I have a copy of Marvel Legendary that I play occasionally with my 7-year-old, and I have no qualms about saying the X-Men box in that game is my favorite of any of the characters. And so for me, if I was to get one or the other, I would rather probably have the X-Men one alone. But since I already have this and I like this, more is not going to be a problem. I think the biggest problem I'm going to run into is just storage, because as you saw if you watched my unboxing of these boxes, there's a lot of wasted space. And eventually, I think I'm just going to take out the inserts and just put all the cards in a box. Anyway, you don't need to hear that. But that's why it's on the Hotness. Expect this to rake in more money than the first one did, because there was a lot of criticism of the first one about saying this game is going to be too simple, it's not going to be difficult. Having played the game now probably 7 or 8 times, we are about 50-50 in terms of winning and losing. Now, you can argue that some of the variation is just slight in terms of the heroes and in terms of the bad guys, but they all do it in a slightly different way, which is still very enjoyable. And it's tough. It's not easy, especially if you're not alpha gaming. So if you're looking for something like that, it plays quick. It's not the quickest setup, but it's also very straightforward. I hope that we get some more locations. There's talk that there's going to be, I believe, a 4th power to add some more variability, to give it a little bit more depth as well. So I just want to know how much the all-in is going to be, and my fear is that it's actually going to be more than the first Kickstarter. They're going to see that, and they're going to see the notoriety and the reception. It's going to be more, as opposed to what we saw with Mythic Battles Ragnarok, which the all-in is actually less than Mythic Battles Pantheon. I wish it was like that. I have a feeling CMON's going to do it the opposite way, though. So we'll see when it launches on the 14th. Now, I'll just run through these obviously a little quick. A lot of returning faces here. We've got Everdell, again, just a super popular game with the Kickstarter finishing a couple weeks ago. You've got Dune Imperium, same thing, combination worker placement, deck building, still hitting hard in terms of popularity. Sleeping Gods is just being delivered more and more. People are picking up at retail. It's getting a lot of critical acclaim as people really liking it from a campaign style game comparative to other campaign style games that are out there. And obviously you have Terraforming Mars with just its own pedigree, and all the expansions are out there. So perennial contenders to be on the hot list whatever week it is. And, this one too. You may have heard of that. Arkham Horror, speaking of another LCG game, the card game, snuck back on the Hotness list this week. I'm not really sure why, but if you're not familiar with it, it's very similar to the deck construction, deck building-esque game of Marvel Champions, but in a completely different way as well, taking the Cthulhu theme and running it through cycles of adventures where you take a single adventure or two, potentially, and you go through these various conspiracies and chapters and fighting and investigating and trying to make your way through the objectives. And the Innsmouth Conspiracy is the latest cycle, and I believe all of the 6 chapters are now available for it, and so that might be in part why it's sort of picking up a little bit of steam, but it's so highly thought of in the first place that having this on the Hotness any week would not surprise me whatsoever. I mean, you can see right here, it is the #1 customizable, 10 thematic, and 22nd overall, so the fact that it's on the Hotness doesn't shock me one bit. Staying right with the Cthulhu theme, next up is AuZtralia by Martin Wallace. It is the semi-cooperative-ish game where you are in Australia and you are fighting off the Ancient Ones, trying to be the best at doing so while doing sort of a pick up and deliver resource gathering style, more Euro-ish game. And the reason it's all of a sudden on the Hotness list, in case you missed my video roundup this past week, is that the big box launched with 2 new expansions, and they're already about 8 times their funding goal right now. Over 100,000, which for a game that sort of, it didn't really fly under the radar. I've been aware of it since it launched, but it definitely never achieved the critical hotness or critical acclaim, or even the notoriety that many of the other Cthulhu-esque themed games have. And so for that reason, I think it's sort of a little bit of surprise, but also not. These expansions are adding just more of a good thing, but they're also adding a 1v all mode, which, depending on what type of gamer you are, is either cool or somewhat divisive. Now, what do you need to know about this? Well, you can't actually get the base game. They're not offering it. They're offering the big box and the expansions, but they're not offering a base game pledge, sort of an all-in. So if you're looking at the game, you're better off picking it up at retail right now. There's a lot of information on the page. There's plenty of videos, and it's just unique. And frankly speaking, I like the addition of these expansions when the base game really doesn't attract me myself personally. But just by the mechanics, I probably won't be getting it just because, like I mentioned, a few of those pick up and deliver, the Euro style-ish, is just not fitting with me. But this is tempting. This is one of those games where I look at it and I go, man, that looks cool. I'd like that. But I go, you don't like those mechanics. Don't do that to yourself. Right? So we all have those. But this is one for me. But I expect it's probably going to be twice this by the end. So it's doing pretty good. And if it's your vibe, check it out. Next up, well, it's a surprise, but it's very similar to Arkham Horror LCG in the sense that it should really never be a surprise that it's on the Hotness, but that is Barrage. Now, if you're not familiar with Barrage, it's a resource management style game with pick up and deliver, very heavy on that side of things, and it's very apparently cutthroat in the Euro mechanisms. It's based off the 1930s, where the Industrial Revolution needs more energy, needs more power. So you are building hydroelectric dams in order to meet the need that is there. So you are trying to build the best one. You're trying to deliver said power through these pressure tunnels that are connected to the energy turbines in the first place of your powerhouse dam. You are representing one of these 4 companies trying to build the best dam by hiring the best engineers, gathering all the right machinery, and claiming the best locations in order to get the water. And here is the interesting aspect, because water is a shared but also contested resource between the players. Very thematic in that sense. Also, your action tokens and your resources are stored on a construction wheel. And so you can't get them unless the wheel goes all the way around. And so better planning, especially early on, leads to better return earlier in the late game. So 2 mechanisms that are unique. So why am I not surprised we're talking about it? Well, it's 54th overall and it's 23rd ranked in strategy. Again, very heavy, way outside my comfort zone. Why are we talking about it now this week? I have no idea, honestly. But there were a couple posts on the threads in the forums with, okay, is there going to be a new expansion? No, there's not going to be a new expansion. But it's a popular game. It's well thought of. It's highly sought after when it comes in the secondary market. So I'm guessing that's more of the reason. And hey, and if I'm missing something, let me know in the comments, because it wouldn't be the first time. But that's Barrage, right? Next up, we have some news from Fort, which is the deck building game, the re-theme of SPQF, which was more of a Greek theme to it, and they redid it with the children-friendly, more colorful, aesthetically pleasing, a little bit just from that side of things, depending if you like the art of Kyle Farron or not. And there has been a little bit of talk about an expansion and just what's going to come of that. Back in January, they posted some print and play on their Discord. So just kind of wondering where that's at and just kind of mentioning it for all you Fort fans out there. Something that might just be on your radar to be aware of more than anything else. Speaking of things that should be on your radar, we have the Marvel Villainous realm of things. If you're familiar with the Disney Villainous, where you take various villains, have them compete against each other by using their own deck and completing their own objectives, whoever does so first wins. They did a Marvel version of that with the villains, and now they're releasing an expansion with 3 characters. One, obviously very, very easily guessed here, Loki, where he is just trying to create mischief as his victory condition. And then you have 2 others. One, Madame Mask, who is having to defeat 8 Marvel heroes. And then MODOK, the mechanized mobile organism designed only for killing. And he is trying to gather the Cosmic Cube, which, from the comics side of things, from my limited knowledge there, that is rather thematic for him. There's not a whole lot more information, but I gather if we're already seeing a little bit of talk about it, it probably isn't too far off later in 2021. So if you liked either of these games, or especially the Marvel one, you should probably check this out. Speaking of IPs and Marvel and asymmetric games, Unmatched by Mondo is putting out, as an April Fool's, not so April Fool's, Deadpool character expansion for the Unmatched series. And if you're not familiar with Unmatched, it's a 1v1 asymmetric miniature-based grid-style battler that is a re-theme of Star Wars Epic Duels. And, I mean, it's Deadpool, right? It's Deadpool. So that's pretty much all you need to know if you know. So it'll be kind of interesting to see, because he's known notoriously for breaking the fourth wall between the comic books and real life. And so how is that going to be manifested in his powers? It's going to be worth checking out. You can pre-order it right now on Mondo's website. That's it. Easy peasy. Quick and clean. There we go. Not sure I'm going to put anything else out before the end of the week for the Kickstarter stuff. We'll kind of see just what time I got and what else piques my interest. So if I don't see you till then, thank you again. Hitting 2,000. Amazing. Never thought I'd be a quarter of the way there. So thank you. I truly appreciate it, and have a great week. Stay classy. See you around.